I remember the first time I laid eyes on Eliza as if it were yesterday. It was a sunny afternoon in a quaint cafe in downtown Boston, the kind of place where time seems to stand still. I had just finished a long week of work and decided to treat myself to a cup of coffee and a slice of carrot cake. The cafe was buzzing with activity, but my attention was immediately drawn to her. Eliza was sitting by the window, her laughter a melodic contrast to the clattering of dishes and murmurs of conversation around us. She was chatting animatedly with a friend, her eyes sparkling with a light that seemed to warm the entire room. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her smile was effortlessly radiant. Even from across the room, I could tell there was something special about her. I mustered the courage to approach her table, my heart racing as I introduced myself. To my delight, she responded with genuine warmth and curiosity. Our conversation flowed naturally, as if we had known each other for years. We talked about our favorite books, our dreams, and our mutual love for travel. As the minutes turned into hours, I realized I was completely enchanted by her. Our first date was a casual stroll through the nearby park, where we shared stories and laughter beneath the canopy of autumn leaves. Eliza had this incredible ability to make even the simplest moments feel extraordinary. We wandered through the park, stopping occasionally to admire the scenery or simply enjoy each other's company. It was during that walk that I first felt the undeniable spark between us. As the months went by, our relationship blossomed. We supported each other through the ups and downs of life, celebrating each victory and comforting each other during setbacks. We would spend weekends exploring new neighborhoods, trying out new recipes together, or just curling up on the couch for a movie marathon. Every day with Eliza felt like an adventure, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. When I proposed to her, it was on a chilly winter evening, just as the first snowflakes began to fall. We were walking hand in hand through the city, the holiday lights casting a warm glow around us. I remember dropping to one knee in the middle of the street, my voice trembling as I asked her to marry me. Her eyes filled with tears of joy as she said yes, and we embraced, our hearts brimming with excitement for the future. Our wedding day was everything we had dreamed of. Surrounded by our closest friends and family, we exchanged vows in a beautiful garden ceremony. Eliza looked stunning in her elegant dress, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. As we shared our first kiss as a married couple, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness and contentment. We were starting a new chapter in our lives, and it felt like nothing could ever come between us. A year after our wedding, our lives took on an even more profound joy when we welcomed our first child, Jackson. The moment he was born, our hearts expanded in ways we had never imagined. Holding him for the first time was a surreal experience, filled with tears of joy and overwhelming love. Eliza and I looked at each other, knowing that this tiny, perfect being was the most precious gift we could ever receive. Jackson brought a new dimension to our happiness. We reveled in the milestones: his first smile, his first steps, and his first words. Our home was filled with laughter and the delightful chaos of parenting. The way Eliza would tenderly care for Jackson, her eyes full of adoration, was a sight I cherished deeply. We found immense joy in watching him grow and in creating a loving environment for him. We traveled as a family, exploring new places and making memories that would last a lifetime. Our adventures were now colored by the wonder of seeing the world through Jackson's eyes. Each day was an opportunity to experience the beauty of life anew, as we discovered the world together as a family. In those early years, everything felt perfect. Our love for each other had deepened, and the bond we shared with our son only strengthened our connection. We were living in a dream, full of hope and excitement for the future, believing that nothing could diminish the happiness we had built. The day we received Jackson's diagnosis is etched into my memory with a clarity that refuses to fade. It was a rainy afternoon when the doctor's office became a place of unimaginable dread. Eliza and I sat across from Dr. Mitchell, our hands clasped tightly together as he spoke. The words felt heavy, almost surreal, as he described Jackson's condition, an autoimmune disorder that would require constant care and monitoring. The shock was immediate. For a few moments, the room seemed to spin, and I could barely process the gravity of what was being said. Jackson had always been such a vibrant, energetic child. His laughter was a constant soundtrack to our lives. To hear that he was facing such a severe and chronic illness was more than we could have ever anticipated. Eliza's face was a mixture of disbelief and anguish. Her eyes, usually so full of light, were now brimming with unshed tears. I could see the moment her hope started to waver, replaced by a deep, gnawing fear for our son's future. We both had to come to terms with the reality that our lives were about to change in ways we had never imagined. We spent hours researching Jackson's condition, reading medical journals, and connecting with support groups. Every piece of information we gathered seemed to add weight to the burden we were already carrying. The road ahead was going to be long and fraught with challenges, but we were determined to face it together. Our days quickly became consumed by doctor's appointments, treatments, and therapy sessions. We juggled our work schedules to ensure one of us was always with Jackson, providing him with the care and comfort he needed. It was a whirlwind of medical jargon and emotional turmoil, and we were thrust into a world we had never wanted to enter. Despite the overwhelming nature of the situation, some moments offered a glimmer of hope. We found solace in the small victories, Jackson's ability to smile through his pain, and his resilience in the face of countless procedures. His strength became a source of inspiration for both Eliza and me. We took turns staying up late, reading to him, and trying to make his days as joyful as possible, even when it felt like our worlds were crumbling. Eliza and I drew closer during this time, united by a shared mission to protect and care for our son. We leaned on each other for support, finding comfort in our mutual determination and love. However, the stress also tested us in ways we hadn't anticipated. There were moments of frustration and exhaustion, where the weight of our new reality felt unbearable. But through it all, we were resolute in our commitment to Jackson. Our friends and family rallied around us, offering their support and helping to ease the burden whenever they could. Their presence provided a much-needed reminder that we were not alone in this fight. We learned to accept help, even when it was difficult, and to find strength in the collective compassion of those around us. Jackson's illness became the defining challenge of our lives, reshaping our priorities and testing our resilience. It demanded a level of fortitude and sacrifice that we hadn't imagined, but it also illuminated the depth of our love and the unbreakable bond that held us together. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. I remember the first time I noticed something was amiss, an evening when Eliza came home late from work and seemed distant. We had planned to cook dinner together, a ritual we had always enjoyed, but she arrived, barely acknowledging my presence, and retreated to the living room with a book. It was unlike her to forego our time together so easily. As weeks passed, these small deviations became more pronounced. Eliza, who had always been a pillar of warmth and engagement in our home, started withdrawing from our daily routines. She began to spend long hours at the office or engaging in activities that took her away from home more frequently. When she was at home, her mind seemed preoccupied, her responses curt and distracted. One of the most noticeable changes was how she started to interact with Jackson. Before, she had been a loving and attentive mother, always eager to participate in his activities and milestones. Now, she often seemed disinterested. The bedtime stories she used to read with such enthusiasm became a task she would rush through, her eyes more focused on her phone than on Jackson's face. I could see the disappointment in Jackson's eyes, his little attempts to capture her attention growing more desperate as the days went by. I tried to talk to Eliza about it, but each conversation seemed to end in frustration. She would brush off my concerns with vague excuses about work pressures or being tired. I felt like I was talking to a wall. The intimacy we once shared was now replaced with a cold distance. It became increasingly clear that something was deeply troubling her, but she was unwilling or unable to share what was going on. I took on more of the household responsibilities, attempting to fill the void left by her absence. I found myself managing Jackson's schedule, handling the chores, and even taking over some of the social obligations we used to share. It was exhausting, but I felt a responsibility to keep our lives running smoothly, even if it meant doing so alone. During this time, I began to notice subtle changes in Eliza's behavior that went beyond mere distraction. She would often come home smelling of unfamiliar perfumes, and there were occasions when she would be in a particularly chipper mood, only to retreat into her shell moments later. I tried to piece together these fragments, sensing that there was more beneath the surface than she was letting on. The growing gap between us was not just about the practicalities of daily life. Emotionally, we were drifting apart. The easy, effortless conversations we used to have became strained. Our once joyful evenings now felt like a series of awkward exchanges, with both of us avoiding meaningful topics. I longed for the connection we had, but every attempt to bridge the gap seemed to only widen it further. This period of small cracks was like watching a beloved structure crumble slowly, piece by piece. I was desperate to understand what was causing this shift in Eliza, but the more I tried to reach out, the more she seemed to retreat. The home that had once been filled with laughter and shared dreams now felt heavy with unspoken words and unresolved tension. It was a confusing and painful time, marked by a growing realization that the bond we had once cherished was slipping through our fingers. The love and companionship we had built seemed to be eroding, leaving behind a sense of uncertainty and loss that neither of us seemed ready to confront. It was an ordinary evening, and the house was quiet after Jackson had gone to bed. Eliza had been out again. Her absence was now a routine part of my life. I was going through our shared emails on the computer when I noticed her phone lying on the kitchen counter. It was unusual for her to leave it unattended, and a small, unsettling curiosity gnawed at me. I tried to dismiss the impulse to look at her phone, knowing that privacy is fundamental in any relationship. But the feeling persisted, a gnawing doubt that I couldn't ignore. I picked up the phone and noticed it was unlocked, something that had never happened before. My heart pounded in my chest as I hesitated, struggling with the ethics of what I was about to do. Eventually, my anxiety won over, and I opened her messaging app. The screen was filled with a long thread of conversations, most of which were from people I didn't know. I scanned through them, feeling a growing sense of dread. My eyes were drawn to one particular conversation that stood out due to its frequency and intensity. The contact name was unfamiliar, and the messages were filled with a level of intimacy that made my stomach churn. As I read through the exchange, my worst fears were confirmed. Eliza was discussing her feelings for another man, someone she had met through work, according to the messages. The words were painful and raw, expressing a deep emotional connection and an attraction that went far beyond mere friendship. They talked about their time together, shared personal thoughts, and even hinted at plans. The messages were detailed and affectionate, with Eliza revealing a level of vulnerability and longing that was not intended for me. Her words painted a picture of a relationship that was not only emotional, but potentially physical as well. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, my mind racing to process the gravity of what I was seeing. The discovery was a crushing blow. All the suspicions and doubts I had harbored were now laid bare in black and white. The reality of Eliza's betrayal was undeniable. I felt a wave of anguish and disbelief wash over me. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with was involved in something that seemed to shatter the very foundation of our marriage. I put the phone down, trying to steady my breathing. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the weight of the revelation pressing heavily on my chest. I replayed the messages in my mind, trying to make sense of them, but it was futile. The pain was too raw, too immediate. I felt like my world had been upended, and I was left grappling with the shattered pieces of my trust and my heart. The next hours were a blur. I felt numb, struggling to come to terms with the betrayal. My mind raced through 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? Why had she hidden it from me? What did this mean for our future? Eventually, I knew that I had to confront Eliza. I couldn't let this fester in silence. As I prepared to face her, I was overwhelmed with a mixture of anger, sadness, and a sense of profound loss. The woman I had once admired and cherished now stood at the center of a storm of betrayal, and I was left to navigate the stormy waters of our crumbling relationship. The confrontation was inevitable, but I was unprepared for the emotional storm it would unleash. I had spent the night wrestling with my thoughts, my anger and hurt boiling just beneath the surface. By the time Eliza returned home that morning, I was resolute and ready to face the truth. When she walked through the door, I could see the weariness in her eyes, a stark contrast to the carefree demeanor she had projected in her messages. She greeted me with a tired smile, but it faltered when she saw the look on my face. I took a deep breath and pulled out her phone, the device that had been the instrument of my shattered trust. "Eliza," I said, my voice trembling slightly but firm, "we need to talk." Her face fell as she saw the phone in my hand. I didn't waste any time. I laid out the evidence, showing her the messages that had confirmed my worst fears. The conversations were displayed in all their painful detail, her words of affection, her plans for the future with someone else. I watched as her expression shifted from shock to guilt, her eyes darting around as she tried to find the right words. "It's not what it looks like," she started, her voice unsteady. "I never meant for it to go this far. It was just a mistake, a moment of weakness." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "A moment of weakness?" I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. "This wasn't just a mistake, Eliza. You've been building something behind my back. You've been emotionally invested in someone else while our family, our son, has been neglected." She tried to defend herself, her eyes pleading. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. It was a temporary lapse. I'm sorry, truly. I didn't want to hurt you. I was just so overwhelmed." Her words were like a knife twisting in my heart. How could she have thought that this could be swept away with apologies? The pain was too deep, the betrayal too raw. "You think you can just come back and pretend nothing happened? We're talking about our family, our life together." Her voice grew more desperate. "Please, let me explain. I'm willing to go to therapy, to make changes. I love you, and I want to make things right." But as much as I wanted to believe her, the trust had been shattered. I needed time to process everything, to decide what was best for us and Jackson. I told her I needed space, and that we both needed to think about our next steps. The next day, as I was trying to come to terms with the weight of what had happened, Eliza's sudden disappearance added another layer of agony to the situation. She left the house without any warning, leaving behind only a note that was brief and devoid of any real explanation. The note simply stated that she needed time alone to think, and that she would be in touch. Her departure was abrupt and jarring. She left Jackson and me alone, with no clear plan for how things would be handled. Jackson, already struggling with his illness, was now left without the stability of his mother's presence. I felt a crushing sense of betrayal and abandonment. My heart ached not just for myself, but for my son, who deserved so much more than this chaos. I scrambled to manage the household and take care of Jackson. The days felt interminable as I tried to balance his medical needs with the overwhelming emotional weight of the situation. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally, and the burden of doing it alone was nearly unbearable. Each day I faced the reality of Eliza's absence and the void it left in our lives. The house felt emptier, the days longer, and the weight of her betrayal more pronounced. I was left to navigate the complexities of single-handedly caring for a sick child while grappling with the profound sense of loss and disillusionment that had been thrust upon me. The pain of betrayal was an ever-present weight on my shoulders, but it was the clarity of my resolve that defined this period of my life. As the days passed and the hurt began to settle into a cold, hard anger, I realized that I needed to take control of the situation. The instinct for revenge was not driven by a desire for chaos, but by a need to make Eliza face the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to understand the true cost of her betrayal. My approach to revenge was not fueled by impulsive rage, but by a calculated strategy. I wanted Eliza to be fully aware of the impact of her decisions and to face the reality of the destruction she had caused. I knew that simply confronting her with my anger would not be enough. I needed to craft a plan that would deliver a message she couldn't ignore. The first step was to gather evidence of her affair and the extent of her negligence. I meticulously documented every instance of her absences, every piece of correspondence that demonstrated her emotional involvement with another man. I collected records and compiled them into a comprehensive dossier. This wasn't just about proving her infidelity. It was about creating a narrative that illustrated the depth of her disregard for our family. Next, I began to think about how to use this information effectively. I considered various avenues: confronting her directly, involving her new partner, or even making the evidence public. However, I wanted to ensure that whatever action I took would lead to a profound realization for Eliza, not just a fleeting moment of discomfort. The goal was to make her understand the full weight of her choices. I decided to arrange a meeting with her under the pretense of discussing Jackson's needs and our current situation. It was important that the meeting took place in a controlled environment where I could present my evidence and articulate my intentions clearly. I wanted to create a setting where she couldn't easily dismiss or deflect from the truth. On the day of the meeting, I prepared myself emotionally and mentally. I knew that this confrontation would be charged with tension and that I needed to remain composed. I set up a presentation with the documentation I had gathered, ensuring that every detail was meticulously organized and displayed. My aim was not only to present the facts, but to make her see the emotional and practical consequences of her actions. When Eliza arrived, her demeanor was a mix of apprehension and false calm. She sat down, her eyes scanning the documents I laid out before her. I began by explaining the situation in a calm, measured tone. As I presented each piece of evidence, I watched her reaction carefully. Her initial defensiveness gradually gave way to shock and remorse as the full scope of her actions became apparent. The conversation was intense. I made it clear that my intent was not merely to hurt her, but to ensure she understood the gravity of what she had done. I detailed how her absence had affected Jackson, how her betrayal had shattered our family, and how her actions had left me in an untenable position. I spoke with a controlled anger, aiming to communicate the pain and the consequences of her choices without losing my composure. Eliza's responses were a mix of apologies and attempts to justify her behavior. She pleaded for forgiveness, promising to make amends and showing visible signs of distress. But my resolve was unwavering. I wanted her to confront the reality of her actions fully, to feel the weight of the decisions she had made. After our meeting, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The revenge I had sought was not about vengeance for its own sake, but about making Eliza confront the full extent of her actions. I hoped that this confrontation would serve as a turning point, both for her and for me, allowing us to move forward with a clear understanding of the price of betrayal. The reality of our situation became even more apparent as I began to confront the practical aspects of dealing with Eliza's betrayal. My initial emotional reaction had been to confront her directly, but now I had to face the legal implications of her actions. I realized that if I wanted to ensure a fair resolution and secure my position in the custody of Jackson, I needed professional legal support. I began by researching family law attorneys, looking for someone with experience in handling complex divorce cases, especially those involving infidelity and parental responsibilities. After a few consultations, I chose an attorney named Michael Stevens, known for his thorough approach and strong advocacy skills. His reputation for fighting hard for his clients gave me some hope amidst the turmoil. Michael and I met to discuss the details of my case. I provided him with all the evidence I had gathered: emails, text messages, records of Eliza's absences, and notes detailing how her actions had impacted our family. Michael was meticulous, advising me on how to organize and present this evidence effectively. He explained the importance of demonstrating not only Eliza's infidelity, but also her neglect of Jackson's needs, as this would be crucial in the custody battle. Our meetings were often intense. Michael worked with me to gather additional documentation, including medical records for Jackson, proving how her absences had affected his care. We compiled everything into a comprehensive case file, building a solid foundation for the legal proceedings. Michael also advised me on the potential outcomes and the best strategies to achieve a fair resolution. With Michael's guidance, I began to feel a sense of control over the situation. The legal preparation was a daunting process, but it was necessary to ensure that Jackson and I would be protected. I understood that this was just the beginning of a long and challenging journey, but having a clear plan and professional support gave me some solace. As the legal process began to take shape, I knew I couldn't keep the situation hidden any longer. The burden of secrecy had become too heavy, and I needed the support of friends and family to navigate the challenges ahead. I decided it was time to open up about what had happened and to share the truth with those closest to us. The decision to disclose the situation was difficult. I was deeply aware of how the revelation would impact our social circles and the relationships we had built over the years. However, keeping everything hidden felt like an additional layer of stress and isolation. I needed to reach out to people who could offer emotional support and practical advice. I started by speaking with a few close friends who had known Eliza and me for years. I chose to tell them in person, arranging meetings where I could explain the situation in detail. I was honest about the betrayal, the impact it had on our family, and the steps I was taking to address it legally. Their reactions were a mix of shock, empathy, and support. They offered comfort and assured me that I wasn't alone in this struggle. Next, I approached our family. Informing them was even more challenging, as I knew it would cause them distress and concern. I chose a calm, composed approach, explaining the situation without going into excessive detail. I focused on the facts and the steps I was taking to ensure Jackson's well-being. My family's response was one of deep concern and support. They rallied around me, offering to help with Jackson and providing emotional encouragement. Sharing the news with our wider circle of friends and acquaintances came later, once I had a clearer understanding of the legal situation and the path forward. I felt that by being open about the circumstances, I could alleviate any potential misunderstandings and ensure that the support network I had was fully aware of the challenges I faced. The process of revealing the truth was both cathartic and painful. It allowed me to receive the support and understanding I needed while also acknowledging the reality of the situation. As I navigated through the responses and offered thanks to those who stood by me, I felt a sense of relief. The support from friends and family provided a crucial anchor during a tumultuous time, and their presence made the burden of the situation more bearable. The courtroom was set for a legal showdown that felt almost cinematic in its intensity. I filed for divorce with a clear and resolute determination, driven by a need to protect my son Jackson and secure a future for him away from the chaos that had consumed our lives. My lawyer, Michael Stevens, was a master of legal strategy, and together, we prepared for what promised to be a high-stakes battle. The first day in court was a spectacle. The courtroom, with its imposing wooden paneling and rows of spectators, seemed to echo with the weight of the proceedings. As I walked in, I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. The judge's gavel marked the beginning of a process that would unravel the tangled web of betrayal and neglect that had brought us to this point. Michael presented our case with meticulous attention to detail. He laid out the evidence of Eliza's infidelity and her disregard for Jackson's needs with calculated precision. Each piece of evidence was like a scene from a dramatic play, meticulously crafted to reveal the full extent of Eliza's failings. We had text messages, photos, and witness testimonies that painted a vivid picture of the emotional and practical neglect Jackson had suffered. Eliza's defense was a blend of denial and attempts to paint herself in a better light. Her lawyers argued that the affair was a momentary lapse and that she was committed to making amends. The courtroom drama unfolded with passionate arguments and emotional testimonies as both sides fought for control over Jackson's future. Throughout the trial, every detail seemed magnified under the scrutiny of the court. The proceedings felt like a series of intense scenes from a legal drama, with each moment carrying the weight of our family's future. When the final judgment came, it was delivered with a sense of dramatic finality. The court ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of Jackson and acknowledging the evidence of Eliza's neglect. The ruling felt like a hard-won victory amid a long and grueling battle. The aftermath of the courtroom drama plunged me into a period of intense stress and burnout. The emotional toll of the divorce and the relentless demands of single parenting created a storm of exhaustion and anxiety. Each day felt like a marathon, with the weight of responsibilities pressing down on me. The transition from courtroom battles to everyday life was jarring. The stress was not just emotional, but physical, as sleepless nights and endless responsibilities took their toll. I found myself struggling to balance the demands of maintaining Jackson's well-being with the personal fallout from the divorce. The exhaustion was palpable, and the constant strain left me feeling drained and overwhelmed. Amid this chaos, I grappled with the emotional fallout of the legal battle. The sense of betrayal and the pressure of being a single parent felt like an unending cycle of stress. My attempts to maintain stability for Jackson were heroic, yet fraught with difficulty. Each day presented new challenges, from managing Jackson's medical needs to navigating the complexities of our altered family dynamic. The experience was a crucible of burnout, where every decision seemed heavy with consequences. I faced moments of profound weariness, where the emotional and physical strain felt nearly insurmountable. Despite this, I pushed through, driven by the need to create a stable and nurturing environment for Jackson. It was a time of deep struggle, but also one of intense personal growth and resilience as I fought to emerge from the shadows of our past and build a future for us both. Eliza's attempts to reconcile were elaborate and dramatic, marked by grand gestures and heartfelt apologies that seemed almost theatrical in their execution. She began her efforts with a carefully orchestrated letter, filled with apologies and promises to change. The letter was delivered with a bouquet of roses, a symbolic gesture that felt more like a scene from a soap opera than a genuine attempt at mending our relationship. As the days went by, Eliza's attempts became increasingly extravagant. She would show up at my doorstep with sobbing apologies and emotional pleas, trying to rekindle the connection we once had. There were moments when she tried to convince me of her sincerity, staging elaborate dinners and heartfelt conversations, hoping to break through my resolve. Her pleas were accompanied by emotional displays, such as handwritten notes and tearful admissions, but each gesture only highlighted the chasm that had formed between us. Despite the intensity of her efforts, I remained steadfast. The pain and betrayal I felt were too profound to be overshadowed by grand gestures or promises of change. Each interaction was a reminder of the trust that had been irrevocably broken, and my decision to reject her attempts was firm and resolute. I maintained a clear boundary, refusing to be swayed by the dramatic attempts to restore what had been lost. Eliza's final attempt involved a public display of regret, where she sought to publicly atone for her actions in front of our mutual friends and family. The scene was charged with emotion, a carefully staged event that aimed to garner sympathy and support. However, even this dramatic gesture fell short of changing my decision. I remained unmoved by the public spectacle, standing firm in my conviction that reconciliation was not possible. As I moved past the tumultuous period of failed reconciliations, I began to reconstruct my life with a focus on both Jackson and myself. The transition was marked by a profound sense of reinvention, as I worked to build a new reality from the remnants of our past. The first step in this transformation was establishing a stable and nurturing environment for Jackson. I embraced the role of a single parent with a renewed sense of purpose, creating a structured routine that prioritized his needs and well-being. This involved setting up a new daily schedule, finding new ways to engage him, and ensuring that he felt supported and loved despite the upheaval. On a personal level, I began to explore new avenues for dealing with solitude and finding fulfillment. I took up hobbies and activities that I'd previously neglected, such as hiking and painting, which provided a sense of solace and creativity. These new pursuits became a way to channel my energy positively, helping me to cope with the loneliness and challenges that came with rebuilding my life. I also sought out support networks and formed new connections, building relationships that offered companionship and understanding. This included engaging with support groups for single parents and reconnecting with old friends who had been a source of strength during the difficult times. The process of creating this new reality was both challenging and liberating. It involved acknowledging the pain of the past while actively working to shape a future that was centered on stability and growth. The journey was marked by moments of introspection and adaptation, as I learned to balance the responsibilities of parenting with the need to nurture my well-being. Through this transformative period, I gradually found a new sense of normalcy and hope, forging a path forward for both Jackson and myself. As I sit down to reflect on the turbulent journey I've endured, I'm struck by the magnitude of the changes that have unfolded in my life. The storm of betrayal, the fierce battles in court, and the relentless efforts to rebuild have left an indelible mark on who I am and how I view the world. In the quiet moments of reflection, I grapple with the lessons learned and how this profound experience has reshaped me. The journey through this turmoil has been a crucible of self-discovery. I've learned about my resilience and strength, discovering depths of fortitude I didn't know I possessed. The pain of betrayal and the stress of single parenting have taught me invaluable lessons about vulnerability, courage, and the power of perseverance. Each challenge faced has been a step toward a deeper understanding of myself and a clearer vision of what truly matters. Amid this reflection, I recognize the importance of embracing change and forging a path forward. I've come to understand that healing is not a linear process, but rather a series of steps marked by both progress and setbacks. This realization has helped me approach my recovery with patience and self-compassion. Looking ahead, my plans for the future are driven by a commitment to creating a stable and fulfilling life for Jackson and myself. I envision a future where we both thrive in an environment built on trust, love, and resilience. My immediate focus is on continuing to nurture Jackson's growth and well-being, ensuring that he feels secure and valued as we navigate this new chapter together. I'm also dedicated to pursuing personal growth and fulfillment. This involves setting new goals for myself, both professionally and personally. I am exploring opportunities for career advancement that align with my passions and skills. aiming to build a career that not only provides for us, but also brings a sense of purpose and satisfaction. On a personal level, I am committed to maintaining the positive habits and routines that have helped me through this period of change. This includes continuing to engage in activities that bring me joy, fostering new relationships, and finding a balance between work and personal life. I'm also focused on maintaining a strong support network, seeking guidance and connection from friends, family, and mentors who have been instrumental in my journey. The future holds the promise of renewal and possibility. While the scars of the past remain, they serve as reminders of the strength and resilience I have developed. My vision for the future is one of hope and optimism, where each day is an opportunity to build a life that is rich in love, stability, and joy. As I forge ahead, I am guided by the lessons of the past and a steadfast commitment to creating a future where Jackson and I can both find happiness and fulfillment.